Hey everybody, figured I'd make another video today just because I don't know, I guess I'm in the mood. And as I've said before, I want this channel to be about more than just gamefowl, and I decided to touch on Peafowl today instead. And in particular, I'm going to start off with a little story about one particular color mutation that is called the Jade. And the reason that I'm starting with that color is because my family were the ones who had it before Brad Legg. He's got them from us. So here's how the story goes. When I was in high school, back in Nebraska, we subscribed to this publication called the Midwest Messenger. And, you know, your other types of county classifieds and those kinds of things. And in one of them was an ad from an old farmer in Wahoo, Nebraska. Now, he was listing pied, cameo, and Spalding peafowl, and at the time we only had blue indies and black shoulders. Now, the blue indie is the kind you see at the zoo. It's got the hens are dark colored on top, kind of a creamy pale breast and a green neck, and then the males are blue necked, brown and white barred on the wings, green tail. And then your black shoulders, the hens look completely different. They're mostly white with a black kind of peppery back. Certain strains have pinstriping on the breast. They've got an orange collar on the neck. Males look like a blue indie, except that they have black wings instead of barred wings. So we get down to this farmer, down to his place, and he had pen after pen of peafowl and a very large flock of standard cochins in assorted colors, because that's all he used to hatch his peacocks. And my dad decided, after looking around, that we were going to get a trio of each color. Now, again, and this is a recurring theme in my family and our history with birds, we didn't have extra pens for the peacocks that we bought. So we hauled them home in a gooseneck trailer, and that's where we kept them. The gooseneck trailer was their home for a short while we built the new pens. And the pens that we built were four pens. Each one had a 10 by 8 shed with a 2-foot walk door on the front that opened up to a 10-foot wide by 20-foot long wire run. So finally we moved the birds in there, and by that time breeding season was over, so we didn't get any raised the first year. And then the second year, I don't remember if it was that year that Brad got them from us or the year after, but anyway, we were at the Madison poultry auction in Madison, Nebraska, and Brad had come up from Missouri, and he'd been coming up for a little while now with his different color mutations. And I figure if anybody knew what these birds were, it was him, because I knew that these birds that we had gotten were not cameos, like the old man said. I didn't know what they were, but I knew they weren't cameos. So I go up to Brad and I say, hey, introduce myself, and I got these peacocks. If I describe what they look like to you, can you tell me what they are? And I'm describing to him. He's saying, no, you're right, they're not cameos, and they don't sound like Otons, and, you know, judging by what you're saying of the crest and their build and the yellow patch on their face, they definitely are a Spalding of some sort, but I honestly don't know what you've got. So my dad talks to him, and he agrees to run up to our farm about an hour away and look at them. Well, my dad and him made some sort of arrangement. The story I get from my dad is that he got that breeding trio from us in exchange for a young trio of purples, and then we were supposed to get a young trio of these birds back from him, which never transpired. I don't know if that was a miscommunication, or my dad just fabricating things, or a deal that went sour. I honestly don't, and perfectly honest, I kind of don't care this many years later. But anyway, as it turns out, I was correct in assuming that it was something I hadn't seen before. In fact, nobody had seen them before because, as Brad discovered, they're an entirely new color mutation, which he then was able to breed into all the different patterns of peafowl that are out there. And my only question of the whole thing is what happened to the rest of them? Because we only bought one trio from that old man in Wahoo, and he was looking to get rid of as many as he could because his health wouldn't allow him to take care of the birds, and he had multiple pens of that color and young birds, and I never saw any like them at any of the auctions or anything. And as far as I know, Brad never went up there and purchased them either, because of course this was a few years after the old man was selling them when Brad purchased them. Now I'm going to show you some photos of the original birds. The bird on the edge of the first image is the Jade male. Now I preferred to call them olives. Brad's the one that named them Jades. And the reason I called them olives is because the eye on the feather had kind of an olive drab color to it, and with like a dusky brown overlay. I still have feathers from this bird at my mom's place. So that bird right there is the original Jade male, and next to him is the Spalding male that we purchased from the same breeder. Now you can tell they're Spaldings because they have longer legs, longer necks. The crest, instead of fanning out like on an India blue, is more condensed and upright. And in this picture you can see the female behind him. Now the female's color matched his wing color all over her body, and she had the same sort of drab green neck. Oh, and the other trait with the Spalding, if they have a lot of Java green blood in them, they have yellow skin under the eye, and these birds had that. And the other pair that you see in there is the original pairs. Two of the original Spaldings we got from the guy, and then there's also the original pied hen that we got from him. So that's the story on that. Now, since then, Brad has become a powerhouse in peafowl genetics, always at the forefront of new colors, and has brought even more new mutations out to the public. I remember him telling me about a place in Montana where he acquired some, and the thing about a lot of these mutations is they're from probably pretty inbred gene pools, and that's how the mutations occur. If I remember correctly, he said the mutation that he picked up in Montana was from a flock that hadn't had any new birds put in it in like 50 years. Okay, so, you know, if you want to really find out just how many colors of peafowl there are in the world, look up Legs Peafowl. That's leg with 2 G's, and they're down in Missouri. They do travel. I think his son has a place of his own now and continues to breed the different mutations as well. But a little bit more on peafowl in general. So at one point we were breeding blue Indy, black shoulder, white pied, and I'll show you a pied here. This is some pied peafowl. And then here's a pied hen with the Spalding male behind her. And here's a Spalding hen. So blue Indy, black shoulder, pied, Spaldings, purples, and I don't remember what all else, but we had about 8 colors. That pales in comparison to what's available out there now. But the problem is a lot of these colors, from what I understand, some of them don't breed true. Others, I heard one color, I can't remember which one, but people have a hard time producing a fertile female out of that color, so you have to cross 2 colors to get that color. So it just seems like a lot of things I don't want to mess with anymore, to be honest. I mean, peacocks do bring good money. We tried one time to turn some loose. They took off almost immediately, and you know, they take up a decent amount of space. They're loud. Had some issues with them in cold weather, especially the ones that had a lot of Java blood in them. But oh, and one of the other things I found out about them was I used to raise ornamental pheasants, and certain species of pheasants don't get along with peafowl. I had an Elliott's male that was continually fighting the Spalding, so you got to keep that in mind as well. But basically, you've got the majority of the colors originate with the India blue because it was in captivity longer. And I think the first 2 mutations that occurred were black shoulder and white. And the whites are not albino. They have colored eyes. They're not lacking pigment. Now the interesting thing about the whites is they're just like white ringneck pheasants. If you look closely at the structure of the feather, you'll still see the markings. It's just white on white. So a white peafowl still has the eye spots in its tail. You only see it when you shine the feather and the light hits it and refracts. So there's that. But black shoulders and whites were the first, and then probably pieds. Spaldings were created by hybridizing the blue India, which is a wild species, with one of the different subspecies of the Java green, which is the other wild subspecies. And then from there, the rest of it's all mutation and crossing. Anything that's Spalding has Java blood in it somewhere in its ancestry. I know one place in particular that has a line of white Spaldings, and I think they're pretty cool looking because they're such high green percentage that they have the yellow on the face and then the rest of the bird's white. But what else can I tell you about peacocks? You know, honestly, like I said, I don't think I'd raise them again. If you're gonna try and raise them, the best luck that I had and the way I was taught was to be hatching chicks, chicken chicks at the same time, and keep chicks that are, you know, a few weeks older back, and take 1 or 2 of them and put them in with the day-old baby pea chicks, because they will teach these pea chicks how to live, because they're kind of dumb. Basically, they act as a surrogate parent, but you don't want to use a day-old chick because it's much smaller than a pea chick. You want one that's got a little age on it. And eventually they'll outgrow, you know, their little friend and that kind of thing. One other thing, I guess, that'd be of interest, maybe to somebody can shed some light on this one for me. One year I hatched out a rather large white male. Well, he was mostly white, that's the thing. He had 1 colored wing feather, so I knew he had black shoulder in him. I didn't know what to make of him, and a guy from Minnesota came down, bought all the young peafowl we had. He went in that bunch. That fall, I was explaining this bird to a friend of mine, and he said you should have kept him because that bird has faulty color genes and was essentially a blank slate. It didn't have the genes for producing its own proper color or pattern, is what he explained to me. So in theory, according to him, I could have put him with a whole slew of different colored hens, and all of the offspring would be pure for whatever color their mother was. Never seen another one like it. Probably never will. One other random fact that I know off the top of my head is some people have told me that peacock tastes like turkey, but it doesn't dry out like turkey. Now, from handling those birds myself, I wouldn't waste the effort on butchering them. They don't seem to have a whole lot of meat on them, and most of what they have seems to be in the legs. So take that for what that's worth. It used to be a delicacy. I've heard of a guy, he was down in Florida, and he used to make a killing off of selling males for quinceañeras because it was a fancy presentation for the dinner. They would roast the bird and then use the feathers and everything in the decoration. So I don't know what to tell you on that either. But well, I don't know. I guess if you got some questions about peacocks, just leave them in the comments. So have a good one. Talk to you later.